My name is Emily, and I'm 32. That afternoon, sunlight spilled through my kitchen blinds, warming the cold coffee in my mug. Clara, my husband's sister, stood there, her face stiff, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "James is too busy with his business," she said, avoiding my eyes. I opened it. Divorce papers. My chest tightened, but a strange calm settled in. Clara's new bracelet caught my eye, a gift from James, and I knew I'd send him something back. Something he'd never expect. Have you ever been blindsided but felt a spark of fight? Drop a like if you have, and subscribe to hear how I turn the tables. Where are you watching from? Let me know below. I sat at the kitchen table, the divorce papers fanned out like a bad hand of cards. Clara had left her footsteps fading down the driveway, but her pitying glance lingered in my mind. My fingers traced James's signature, sharp and careless, dated a week ago. He'd planned this, kept it secret, and sent his sister to do his dirty work. My stomach churned, not with tears, but with a quiet, gnawing ache. How long had he been someone else? I picked up my phone, hands trembling, and dialed Sarah. She answered on the first ring. "Emily, what's wrong?" Her voice, steady and fierce, was a lifeline. I choked out the words, "James, divorce papers. Clara?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "I'm coming over. Stay put." I hung up, staring at the papers again, their legal jargon blurring. A sticky note peeked out from the stack, James's handwriting scrawled across it. "Let's make this quick." My breath caught. Quick. After 8 years, 2 miscarriages, and a house we built together. The words felt like a blade, casual and cruel, slicing through the life I thought we had. I stood, pacing the kitchen, my bare feet cold against the tile. The clock ticked too loudly, marking time I didn't want to face. I opened the fridge, then closed it, unable to think about food. My eyes landed on a photo taped to the door, me and James at a county fair last summer, his arm around me, both of us laughing. I ripped it down, crumpling it in my fist. When had he stopped looking at me like that? The ache in my chest sharpened, laced with something new, humiliation. Clara had seen me unravel, and James hadn't even bothered to face me. Sarah's car pulled up, tires crunching gravel. She burst through the door, her curly hair, wild eyes blazing. "What the hell, Emily?" She hugged me tight, her lavender shampoo grounding me. I handed her the papers and she scanned them, her jaw tightening. "This is low, even for him." She tossed them on the table and grabbed my shoulders. "You okay?" I shook my head. Words stuck. "Not okay, but not broken. Not yet." We sat, and I told her everything. Clara's stiff delivery, the bracelet glinting on her wrist, James' absence. Sarah's face darkened. "He's been weird for months, Em. Those late nights at the office, I bet he wasn't working." Her words landed like stones, stirring a suspicion I'd buried. James had been distant, sure, but an affair. I pushed the thought away, not ready to go there. Instead, I focused on Clara. "Why her?" I asked. "Why make his sister the messenger?" Sarah leaned back, sipping my cold coffee like it was whiskey. "Because he's a coward, and Clara's his lapdog. Always has been." I flinched. Clara and I weren't close, but we'd had moments, holidays, shared jokes. Her delivering those papers felt personal, like she'd chosen sides. Sarah kept going. "You need to call him M. Demand answers." I nodded, but my throat tightened. What if he didn't care enough to explain? The doorbell rang, sharp and jarring. My heart jumped, half expecting James. But it was a delivery guy dropping off a package. I signed for it, distracted, and tore it open. Inside was a book I'd ordered weeks ago, a self-help guide on starting over. The irony stung. I tossed it aside, but Sarah picked it up, flipping through it. "Maybe this is a sign," she said, half serious. "You're stronger than this, Em." I wanted to believe her, but the weight of James's signature, that sticky note, held me down. I grabbed my laptop, needing something to do. "Let's check the bank account," I said, voice steadier than I felt. Sarah raised an eyebrow but nodded. I logged in, expecting routine bills. Instead, I saw withdrawals, thousands of dollars moved out over months, starting last fall. My pulse raced. James hadn't mentioned any big expenses. No new car, no home repairs. Where was the money going? Sarah leaned over, her voice low. "This isn't right, Em. You need to dig deeper." I clicked through transactions, each one a small betrayal. A transfer here, a cash withdrawal there. My hands shook as I wrote down dates, amounts. Sarah watched quiet, now her anger mirroring mine. "He's hiding something," she said finally. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I looked at the divorce papers again, that sticky note glaring up at me. "Let's make this quick." My humiliation burned hotter, twisting into something sharper. James thought he could erase me, but I wasn't done yet. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding like it wanted to break free. Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide, but didn't push. I stood, needing to move, and grabbed my keys. "Let's go for a drive," I said, my voice tight. She nodded, sensing I was on edge. We climbed into my car, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the dashboard. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay in that house, surrounded by James' secrets. The radio hummed low, some country song about lost love that I didn't bother to change. Sarah broke the silence. "You should call Clara," she said. "Ask her what she knows about the money." I gripped the wheel, my knuckles whitening. Clara's face flashed in my mind, her awkward stance in my kitchen, the way she'd hurried out. She'd been part of this, hadn't she? Delivering those papers wasn't just a favor. It felt like a betrayal. I pulled into a gas station, more to stall than anything else. While Sarah filled the tank, I texted Clara. "We need to talk. Why didn't James come himself?" My thumb hovered over the send button, doubt creeping in. What if she lied? What if she told James I was asking questions? I hit send anyway, my pulse racing. The reply came fast, too fast. "He's just busy, Emily. I'm sorry you're hurt." I stared at the screen, anger flaring. Busy. That word again, like it excused everything. Sarah slid back into the passenger seat, glancing at my phone. "What did she say?" I handed it over and she scoffed. "She's covering for him." Typical Clara, always playing the good sister. Her words stung, but they rang true. Clara had always been James's shadow, quick to defend him, even when we argued over small things like whose turn it was to cook dinner. I'd thought it was just sibling loyalty, but now it felt like a wall I'd never break through. We drove on the town, blurring past strip malls, apart kids riding bikes. I turned onto a quiet street, my thoughts spinning. Those withdrawals kept nagging at me, each one a question mark. I remembered James' new habit of taking calls outside his phone, angled away from me. Had I been blind, or had he just gotten better at hiding? Sarah reached over, squeezing my hand. "You're not alone in this, Em. We'll figure it out." My phone buzzed again. Another text from Clara. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I read it aloud, my voice shaking. Sarah's jaw dropped. "She's blaming you. Unbelievable." The words hit like a punch, twisting my anger into something heavier, self-doubt. Had I pushed James away, I'd been working long hours at the bookstore, saving for a vacation we'd dreamed about. Was that enough to make him run? I shook my head, trying to shake the thought. No, this was on him. I pulled over, parking under a row of oak trees. The air felt thick, like it was pressing me down. I needed answers, not Clara's half-truths. "Let's call his office," I said, surprising myself. Sarah nodded, pulling out her phone to find the number. I dialed, my hands sweaty, and a receptionist answered, her voice clipped. "James, he's been working remotely for weeks." My stomach dropped. Remotely. He'd told me he was at the office every night, coming home late, exhausted. Another lie. Sarah watched me hang up her face, grim. "He's playing you, Em?" The truth settled in, cold and heavy. James wasn't just leaving me, he'd been building a whole other life piece by piece while I clung to the one we had. I leaned back, closing my eyes, the weight of it all pressing against my ribs. Clara's text burned in my mind, her words a mirror to my fear I'd been too much or not enough. But as the anger simmered, a new resolve flickered. I wasn't the one who'd broken us, and I wasn't going to let him walk away clean. I started the car, the engine's hum steadying me. Sarah looked over, a small smile breaking through. "That's my girl," she said. Wherever this road was leading, I was ready to follow it, even if it meant facing more of James's secrets. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky orange, and I drove on, knowing the worst was still ahead. The car's engine cut off, but my mind kept racing. Sarah and I sat in silence, the weight of that call to James' office hanging between us. Remotely. He'd been lying about his late nights for weeks, maybe longer. I stared out the windshield, the oak trees swaying in the evening breeze, and felt a knot tighten in my chest. Sarah touched my arm. "You okay?" I shook my head, unable to speak. Okay was a million miles away. Back home, I dropped my keys on the counter, the clatter too loud in the quiet house. Sarah followed me in her phone, already out scrolling through James's social media. "Look at this," she said, holding it up. A post from last month, James at a bar grinning with the caption, "New beginnings." My stomach twisted. He'd been out celebrating while I was home planning our next anniversary. I grabbed my laptop again, needing to know more. The bank account was still open on the screen, those withdrawals glaring at me. I dug deeper, clicking through statements, my hands shaking. One transfer caught my eye. $5,000 to an account I didn't recognize, dated 3 months ago. Then another, $2,000 last week. My breath hitched. This wasn't just carelessness. This was deliberate. Sarah leaned over, her voice low. "What's that?" I pointed at the screen, my voice barely a whisper. "He's moving money, hiding it." She cursed under her breath, something she rarely did. "You need to talk to someone who knows his finances." "Like Tom." I nodded, remembering Tom, James' old college buddy who worked at the bank. He'd always been kind, a little shy, but I hadn't seen him in years. I found his number in my contacts, my thumb hovering. What if he told James I was snooping? I dialed anyway, too angry to care. Tom picked up, his voice hesitant. "Emily." "It's been a while." I cut to the chase, asking about the transfers. He paused too long, then said, "I can't talk about that. Bank rules." My frustration boiled over. "Tom, please, I'm losing everything." He sighed, his tone softening. "Meet me tomorrow. I'll see what I can do." I hung up, my heart pounding. Sarah gave me a look. "He knows something, doesn't he?" I nodded, but the waiting felt like torture. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, the ceiling fan clicking, my thoughts spiraling. Every creak of the house made me flinch, half expecting James to walk through the door with excuses. I got up, pulling on a sweater, and wandered to the living room. My eyes landed on a box in the corner, stuff from our old guest room I'd never unpacked. I knelt, rifling through it, desperate for a distraction. Inside was a journal, one I'd kept during our first year of marriage. I flipped it open, my handwriting neat and hopeful. James made me breakfast today just because. I love him so much. My throat tightened, tears burning. When had that man disappeared? I shoved the journal back, but something else caught my eye. A small envelope tucked in the box. My name was on it in James's scrawl. I opened it, my hands unsteady. It was a note, dated last year. Me. You're my home. Always. I stared at it, the words mocking me. If I was his home, why was he tearing it down? I crumpled the note, my anger surging. He didn't get to leave me with sweet lies while he stole our life away. The next morning, I woke to a text from Clara. It was short, defensive. I told you, Emily, you pushed him away. Your career, your late nights. He needed more. I read it twice, my blood boiling. My career, I worked at the bookstore pouring my heart into it while James spent hours on his phone dodging me. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Clara wasn't worth my words, but her accusation clawed at me, planting a seed of doubt. Had I been too focused on work, I shook it off, but it lingered sharp and ugly. I met Tom at a diner across town, the kind with sticky tables and burnt coffee. He looked nervous, his tie loosened, a folder in his hands. Emily, this is risky, he said, sliding it over. I opened it, my heart in my throat. Bank statements, not ours, but James. Transfers to an account under a name I didn't know dated back 6 months. My hands shook as I read the amounts, thousands more than I'd seen. Tom leaned in, his voice low. He's been careful, but not careful enough. I looked up, my voice breaking. Who's getting the money, Tom? He hesitated, then whispered, I can't say. But it's not good. The diner spun, the noise fading. James wasn't just leaving me, he was building something else, and I was the last to know. I left the diner, Tom's folder clutched to my chest, the weight of his words echoing. Not good. The parking lot smelled of grease and exhaust, but I barely noticed my legs moving on autopilot to the car. Sarah was waiting, her eyes searching my face. What did he say? I slid into the driver's seat, handing her the folder without a word. She flipped through it, her breath catching. This is bad, Em. Really bad. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The numbers on those statements burned in my mind, each one a brick in the wall James had built between us. I drove aimlessly, the town's lights smearing into streaks. Sarah didn't push, just sat there, her presence the only thing keeping me grounded. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, Clara's name flashing. I ignored it, but it buzzed again, insistent. Sarah grabbed it, reading aloud. Diane wants to talk, says it's important. My stomach dropped. Diane, James's mother, had never warmed to me, her smiles always thin, her hugs perfunctory. The thought of facing her now with my world crumbling made my skin crawl. We pulled up to my house, but I didn't want to go in. Not yet. Let's do it, I said, my voice flat. Let's see Diane. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. You sure I wasn't, but sitting still felt worse. We drove to Diane's house, a pristine colonial on the edge of town, its lawn manicured to perfection. The porch light glowed, casting shadows that felt too sharp. I knocked, my heart hammering, and Diane opened the door, her face a mask of practiced concern. Come in, Emily, she said, her voice smooth as glass. I stepped inside, Sarah behind me, the air heavy with the scent of lavender candles. Diane gestured to the couch, but I stayed standing, the folder still in my hands. She didn't offer tea or small talk, just sat, her posture rigid. I hear you're upset, she said, folding her hands. But you need to understand James. He's under pressure. My jaw clenched. Pressure? I wanted to scream. He's stealing from our life, and you're defending him. I held up the folder, my voice shaking. He's moving money, Diane. Thousands. Behind my back. Her eyes flicked to the papers, but her expression didn't change. You're blowing this out of proportion, she said. James is providing for his future. You've always been so focused on your little bookstore. Maybe you didn't see what he needed. The words hit like a slap, each one carving deeper into my doubt. I'd poured my heart into that store, thinking it was for us, for our dreams. Had I missed something? Sarah stepped forward, her voice sharp. Don't put this on her, Diane. He's lying to everyone. Diane's gaze hardened, but she didn't respond. Just looked at me, her silence louder than words. I felt small, like a child caught in the wrong. A photo on her mantel caught my eye, James and Clara laughing, their late father between them. I wasn't in it. Of course I wasn't. My chest ached, the realization sinking in. I'd never been part of their family. Not really. Diane stood, smoothing her skirt. You should go, Emily. This isn't helping anyone. I wanted to argue, to demand answers, but my voice failed me. Sarah took my arm, guiding me out the door, clicking shut behind us. The night air was cold, biting my skin, but I barely felt it. Diane's words looped in my head, twisting with Clara's text from earlier. You pushed him away. Was it true? Had I driven James to this, to secrets and lies? Back in the car, Sarah was furious, ranting about Diane's nerve, but I barely heard her. My eyes kept drifting to the folder, those statements a map of James' betrayal. I thought of our mornings together, sharing coffee, planning our future. Had it all been a lie? My hands curled into fists, nails digging into my palms. The pain was no longer just hurt. It was rage, raw and unstoppable, building with every breath. I didn't know what James was hiding, but I knew one thing: I was going to find out, no matter how much it broke me. The folder from Tom sat heavy in my lap as I drove to a coffee shop across town, the morning air thick with summer heat. My hands gripped the wheel, still shaking from Diane's cold dismissal last night. Sarah had gone home, promising to check in later, but I needed answers now. Tom had texted saying he'd meet me here, his voice tense when we spoke. He'd found something else, something he couldn't say over the phone. My stomach churned, a mix of dread and desperation pushing me forward. Inside, the shop buzzed with chatter, the smell of roasted beans sharp in the air. Tom was already there, tucked in a corner booth, his face pale, a new stack of papers in front of him. I slid in across from him, my heart thudding. What is it? I asked, skipping pleasantries. He pushed the papers toward me, his eyes darting around like someone might be watching. These are from a separate account, he whispered. James opened it last year. I opened the folder, my breath catching. Statements just like the ones before, but these had a name attached. Rachel Harper. A woman. My chest tightened, the name slicing through me like glass. I scanned the pages, each transaction a stab. Hotel charges, restaurant bills, a jewelry store purchase. Thousands of dollars funneled to this account to her. I looked up at Tom, my voice barely audible. Who is she? He shifted, uncomfortable. I don't know much, Emily. She's someone from his office. They've been close for a while. Close? The word landed like a boulder, crushing the air from my lungs. I remembered Rachel vaguely from a company party 2 years ago. Tall, confident, her laugh too loud, her hand lingering on James' arm. I'd brushed it off then. Now it felt like a warning I'd ignored. Tom leaned closer, his voice urgent. There's more. He's been transferring assets, Emily. Part of your savings, the house equity. My vision blurred, the words on the page swimming. Our house, the one we'd painted together, the one where I'd planted roses in the yard. He was stealing it piece by piece for her. I pressed my hands to the table, trying to steady myself. but the room felt like it was tilting. Tom reached out, then stopped, his face helpless. "I'm sorry," he said. "I had to tell you." I stood, needing air, the folder clutched tight. "Thanks, Tom." I managed, my voice hollow. I stumbled outside, the sun, too bright, the world too loud. My car felt like a cage, but I got in, locking the doors. Rachel Harper. Her name looped in my head, each syllable a fresh wound. I pulled out my phone, my fingers moving before I could think, and searched her name. Her profile popped up, a polished headshot from James's company website. She was smiling, her eyes sharp, her bio boasting awards and projects. Projects with James. My throat burned, tears threatening, but I blinked them back. I wasn't ready to break. I drove to Clara's apartment, my anger a living thing clawing at my ribs. She lived in a tidy complex, flowers lining the walkways, a cruel contrast to the storm inside me. I banged on her door louder than I meant to, and she opened it, her face paling when she saw me. "Emily." "What's wrong?" I held up the folder, my voice shaking with rage. "You knew, didn't you? About Rachel, about the money." Her eyes widened, and she stepped back, her hands twisting together. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her voice cracked, giving her away. I pushed past her, stepping into her living room, the folder spilling papers onto her coffee table. "Don't lie to me, Clara. You've been covering for him." She sank onto the couch, her shoulders slumping, and for a moment I saw guilt flicker across her face. "Emily, I didn't want to hurt you," she said, her voice small. "He made me promise not to say anything." I froze, the words hitting like a tidal wave. "Promise." She'd known about Rachel, about the affair, and still stood in my kitchen, handing me those divorce papers, like it was nothing. My knees buckled, and I gripped the arm of a chair, trying to stay upright. "How long?" I asked, my voice breaking. Clara looked away, her silence deafening. "Months," she whispered finally. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but all I could do was stand there, the truth crashing over me. James hadn't just left me. He'd built a new life with her, and Clara had helped him hide it. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible, tearing open every hope I'd clung to. I grabbed the papers, my hands trembling, and walked out. Her sobs fading behind me, but the pain was only beginning. I stumbled out of Clara's apartment, the folder a dead weight in my hands, her confession ringing in my ears. Months. She'd known for months. The sidewalk blurred beneath my feet, my pulse a frantic drumbeat. I needed to see it for myself to make this real. My phone was already out, James's location still shared from a habit we'd never broken. It pinged at a hotel downtown, a sleek place we'd never stayed, too fancy for our budget. My stomach lurched, but my hands steadied. I got in the car and drove. The hotel loomed ahead, all glass and sharp angles, its lobby glowing through wide windows. I parked across the street, my breath shallow, and watched. People moved inside, their silhouettes soft against the light, but then I saw him. James, in a crisp blazer, laughing, his hand resting on a woman's back. Rachel. Her hair caught the light, her posture easy, intimate. My heart stopped, the world narrowing to that single point of contact. They moved toward the bar, her laugh carrying faintly through the open door. I stepped out of the car, my legs unsteady, drawn forward like a moth to flame. The lobby was cool, smelling of polished wood and expensive perfume. I stood by a pillar, half hidden, my eyes locked on them. Rachel leaned closer to James, her fingers brushing his sleeve, and he smiled the same smile he'd once saved for me. A necklace glinted at her throat, delicate and familiar, a twin to the one he'd given me on our 5th anniversary. My hand flew to my chest, where that same necklace had hung until I'd tucked it away last year, too heavy with memories. A waiter approached them, setting down drinks, and James said something, his voice low, lost in the hum of the crowd. Rachel laughed again, her head tilting back, and I saw it then. The ease between them, the kind built on months, maybe years of stolen moments. My nails dug into my palms, the pain grounding me, but not enough. I wanted to scream, to storm over and demand answers, but my feet wouldn't move. I was invisible, a ghost watching my own life unravel. A couple passed by their conversation, snapping me back. The woman glanced at me, her brow furrowing, and I realized I was trembling, my face wet with tears I hadn't felt fall. I wiped them away, my hands clumsy, and forced myself to look again. James was signing a bill, his movements casual like this was just another night. Rachel stood, slipping her arm through his, and they headed toward the elevators. My breath caught a sob, choking me. They were going upstairs together, while I stood here holding the wreckage of our marriage. I turned away, the lobby spinning, and pushed through the doors into the night. The air was thick, suffocating, but I gulped it down, trying to steady myself. My phone buzzed, Sarah, probably checking in, but I couldn't answer. Not now. I leaned against my car, the metal cool against my back, and stared at the hotel's glowing facade. Every moment I'd spent loving James, every sacrifice, every dream felt like a lie. He'd replaced me not just with her, but with a life I'd never been invited to join. The folder slipped from my hands, papers scattering on the pavement, and I didn't bother to pick them up. What was the point? The truth was here, in the way he touched her, in the necklace she wore, in the life he'd built without me. My chest heaved, the pain so raw, it felt like I was splitting apart. I slid to the ground, my back against the car, and let the tears come, each one a shard of the life I'd lost. There was no going back, no unseeing this, and the weight of it crushed me, leaving nothing but a hollow ache. The street outside the hotel was quiet now, the scattered papers from Tom's folder still strewn across the pavement. I sat against my car, the cold ground seeping through my jeans, my tears drying in the night air. James and Rachel were upstairs, their laughter echoing in my mind. But something shifted inside me. The pain was still there, sharp and raw, but beneath it, a spark flickered, anger, not just at him, but at myself, for letting his betrayal define me. I wasn't this broken thing. Not anymore. I gathered the papers, my hands steadier, and drove home, the city lights blurring past. Sarah's car was in my driveway, her silhouette pacing in the living room window. I walked in, and she rushed over, her eyes wide. "Where were you?" "I saw them," I said, my voice low, steady. "James and Rachel, at a hotel." Her face fell, but she didn't say anything, just pulled me into a hug. I let her hold me, but my mind was already racing, plotting. We sat at the kitchen table, the divorce papers still there, mocking me. Sarah grabbed a notebook, her pen poised. "What's the plan, Em? We're not letting him win." I nodded, the spark in my chest growing. "I need a lawyer," I said. "Someone who'll fight dirty if they have to." Sarah grinned, already scrolling her phone. "I know just the person. Amanda Pierce. She's a shark, and she's been through her own divorce. She'll get it." I called Amanda, my voice calmer than I expected. She answered, her tone brisk but warm, and I laid it all out, James' affair, the hidden accounts, the hotel. She listened, asking sharp questions, and by the end, she was all in. "Come to my office tomorrow," she said. "Bring everything you've got." I hung up, a weight lifting, replaced by purpose. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was steering, not just drifting. Sarah and I spread out the evidence: Tom's bank statements, Clara's texts, the crumpled note from James's envelope. I dug through my desk, finding a USB drive with old voicemails I'd saved. One was from James months ago, his voice slurred from a late night. "I need space, Em. You're too much sometimes." I'd laughed it off, then thinking he was just stressed. Now it was a weapon. I played it for Sarah, her jaw tightening. "That's gold," she said. "Amanda will eat this up." I started typing a letter to James, my fingers flying, each word a release. I didn't mention Rachel or the hotel that would come later. Instead, I wrote about us, about the promises he'd broken, the life he'd stolen. I quoted our vows, the ones we'd written ourselves, his voice shaking as he'd said them. "You promised to choose me," I wrote, "but you chose yourself." It wasn't just a letter. It was a mirror forcing him to see what he'd done. Sarah read it over my shoulder, her voice soft. "Damn, Em, that's powerful." I printed it, folding it carefully, and set it aside. The folder of evidence grew, each piece a brick in the wall I was building. I thought of Clara, her guilt, her broken loyalty. Could I use that? I hesitated, then texted her. "I know about Rachel. Meet me tomorrow. No excuses." My phone buzzed almost instantly. Her reply frantic. "I'm sorry, Emily. I'll come." I didn't respond, but a grim satisfaction settled in. She'd been his pawn, but now she'd be mine. The clock read past midnight, but I wasn't tired. Sarah yawned, stretching, but her eyes were bright. "You're back," she said, grinning. "The old Emily." I shook my head, a small smile breaking through. Not the old one. A new one. I looked at the letter, the evidence, the plan taking shape. James thought he could erase me, but I was rewriting the story. The spark in my chest was a flame now steady and fierce, ready to burn through his lies. The morning sun cut through my bedroom blinds, sharp and unyielding, as I packed the folder of evidence into a leather satchel. Sarah was still asleep on the couch, her notebook open to a page of scrawled ideas, but I didn't wake her. Today was mine to face. I slipped on a blazer, one I hadn't worn since a job interview years ago, its weight grounding me. Amanda's office was my first stop, but Clara was next, and the thought of her guilt-ridden face fueled me. At Amanda's office, a small suite with frosted glass doors, she greeted me with a firm handshake and a knowing look. "You're ready," she said, scanning my face. I nodded, spreading the evidence across her desk: bank statements, the voicemail transcript, Clara's texts, my letter to James. She flipped through it all, her pen tapping rhythmically, then leaned back. "This is strong, Emily. He's cornered. We can push for alimony, the house, maybe even damages." Her confidence was contagious, but I felt a pang: damages for a broken heart. No court could fix that. We strategized for an hour. Amanda scribbling notes, her questions precise. "Did you share finances fully? Any joint investments?" I answered, my voice steady, each detail sharpening my resolve. She suggested a private investigator to dig deeper into Rachel's role, but I hesitated. I didn't need more proof of his betrayal. I needed to reclaim my life. "Let's start with this," I said, pointing to the folder. She smiled, a glint in her eye. "I like your fire." I left her office, the satchel lighter, but my purpose heavier. Clara was waiting at a park nearby, per my text, sitting on a bench by a duck pond. Her face was drawn, her hands twisting a tissue, and for a moment, I almost pitied her. But then I remembered her standing in my kitchen, delivering James' papers, her loyalty to him outweighing me. I sat beside her, the bench cold, and slid the folder between us. "You're giving this to James," I said, my voice low, firm. Clara's eyes widened, the tissue shredding in her fingers. "Emily, I can't. He's already furious with me. I leaned closer, my gaze unflinching. You owe me this. You knew about Rachel and said nothing. She flinched, tears welling, but didn't argue. What's in it? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't smile, didn't soften. Everything he needs to see. The letter, the evidence, all of it. She nodded, defeated, and took the folder, her hands trembling. I stood ready to leave, but paused, a question burning. Why didn't you tell me, Clara? Her eyes met mine, raw and red. I thought I was protecting him, protecting us. The family. I shook my head, the word family cutting deep. I was your family too, I said, and walked away, the pond's ripples catching the light behind me. Her silence followed, but it didn't matter. She'd deliver the envelope, and James would face the truth. Back home, I found a small wooden box in my closet, one my father had carved for me as a kid. Inside were keepsakes, a locket from my mother, a ticket stub from my first date with James. I pulled out the locket, its silver cool against my palm, and set the rest aside. The ticket stub felt like a relic from another life, one I didn't need anymore. I tucked the locket in my pocket, a reminder of who I was before him, and closed the box. Sarah woke as I brewed coffee, her hair a mess, her grin wide when she saw me. You look like a woman on a mission, she said. I poured her a mug, my hand steady. I am, I said, and meant it. The letter, the evidence, Clara's role, it was all in motion now, a machine I'd built to hold James accountable. I sat at the table, the coffee warm in my hands, and looked out the window. The world was still turning, but I was no longer just along for the ride. I set the mug down, my eyes fixed on the horizon, and felt the quiet strength of a woman who'd chosen herself. The coffee in my mug had gone cold, but I didn't move from the kitchen table, my eyes fixed on the phone. Sarah sat across from me, picking at a bagel, her usual chatter replaced by a tense quiet. I'd given Clara the envelope last night, and now the waiting was a weight heavy and unyielding. James would have it by now, the letter and evidence laid bare. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with a strange anticipation, like standing at the edge of a cliff. My phone buzzed, shattering the silence. James's name flashed on the screen, a voicemail notification. I stared at it, my pulse quickening, and Sarah raised an eyebrow. Play it, she said, her voice soft but firm. I hesitated, then pressed the button, his voice spilling out sharp and frantic. Emily, what the hell is this? You're trying to ruin me. Those papers, those lies, you're pathetic. My heart raced, but not from hurt. His panic was real raw, and it meant my plan had hit its mark. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes wide. He's rattled him. Really rattled. I nodded, replaying the message, catching the tremor in his voice. Pathetic. The word stung, but it didn't break me. Instead, it fueled the fire I'd lit, the one burning through the fog of his betrayal. I saved the voicemail, another piece for Amanda, and set the phone down. He wasn't yelling because I was wrong, he was yelling because I was right. The doorbell rang sharp and sudden, making us both jump. I stood, my legs stiff, and opened the door to find Clara, her face, blotchy eyes red from crying. She clutched her purse like a lifeline, her voice shaking. He's furious, Emily. He screamed at me, said I betrayed him. I stood still, my hand on the doorknob, processing her words. James had turned on her, his own sister, just as I'd hoped, but seeing her like this, fragile and lost, stirred something uneasy in me. Come in, I said, stepping aside. She shuffled to the couch, collapsing into it, her hands covering her face. Sarah watched her expression hard, but didn't speak. Clara's voice broke, as she talked, words tumbling out. He threw the folder across the room, called me a traitor. He said, "You're out to destroy him, Emily." I sat across from her, my face calm, but inside a storm churned. Destroy him. He'd destroyed us, and now he was scrambling, lashing out at anyone close. I leaned forward, my voice steady. "What else did he say?" "Clara?" She looked up, her eyes searching mine as if weighing whether to trust me. "He's scared," she whispered. "Scared of what you'll do next." My breath caught a surge of power mixing with the ache. Scared. James, who'd planned his escape with such precision, was unraveling because of me. But Clara's next words hit harder. "He said you'll regret this. He's talking to his lawyer." The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Sarah cursed under her breath, but I stayed still, my mind racing. A threat veiled but clear. James wasn't just angry, he was fighting back, and I'd expected it hadn't. Amanda had warned me this might happen, but hearing it from Clara made it real. I looked at her, her hands trembling, and saw the cost of my plan. She'd been caught in the crossfire. Her loyalty to James shattered her place in her own family. Shaken. I stood, needing to move, and paced to the window. The street outside was quiet, kids riding bikes, unaware of the war inside my house. Clara's voice followed me softer now. "I didn't know it would be like this, Emily. I thought I was helping him." I turned my gaze sharp. Helping him hurt me. She flinched, tears spilling, and I felt a pang, guilt maybe, but it was fleeting. She'd chosen her side long ago. My phone rang again, Amanda's name this time. I answered, stepping into the hallway, my voice low. She didn't waste time. James's lawyer reached out. "They're nervous, Emily. Your evidence is solid and they know it. They want to negotiate." I closed my eyes, a wave of relief crashing against the tension. Negotiate. It meant I'd shaken him, forced his hand. But as I hung up, Clara's words echoed, "You'll regret this." The victory was real, but so was the cost, and I stood there caught in the stillness, my heart pounding with both triumph and dread. I stepped back into the living room, Amanda's words still ringing in my ears. Negotiation. James was cornered, but Clara's warning clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake. She was still on the couch, her face buried in her hands, the air heavy with her quiet sobs. Sarah stood by the window, arms crossed, her silence louder than any words. I sat across from Clara, my hands folded, my voice calm but edged. "You can go now," I said. She looked up, eyes swollen, and nodded, gathering her purse with trembling hands. The door clicked shut behind her, and Sarah turned to me, her expression softening. "You okay?" I didn't answer, just stared at the spot where Clara had sat. Her defeat a mirror to my own exhaustion. The fight was working. James was rattled, his lawyer scrambling, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt like peeling back layers of a life I'd trusted only to find rot underneath. My phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. I opened it, my breath catching. It was Diane. "We need to talk. In person. Now." My stomach twisted, her demand sharp and cold like a blade pressed to my skin. Sarah saw my face and grabbed the phone. "Don't go, Em. She's just trying to control this." But I stood, my legs moving before my mind caught up. "I need to," I said, my voice hollow. "If I don't face her, she'll think she's won." Diane's house was a 20-minute drive, but it felt like seconds, the road a blur of green and gray. I parked in her driveway, the manicured lawn mocking my chaos. She opened the door before I knocked her face tight, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't name. Inside, the house was silent. The lavender candles unlit the air, stale. She didn't invite me to sit, just stood by the dining table, her hands clasped. "This has to stop, Emily," she said, her voice low, controlled. You're tearing our family apart." I stared at her, my anger flaring, but I kept it leashed. "Your family." I said my words slow, deliberate. James tore us apart when he chose Rachel. When he stole from me, Diane's lips thinned, but she didn't flinch. "You're being dramatic," she said. "He's made mistakes, but you're humiliating him, publicly." I laughed a bitter sound that surprised me. "Humiliating him?" "He sent Clara to my house with divorce papers. He humiliated me." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "You think this little stunt with your lawyer will fix anything? James is my son. I'll protect him no matter what it takes." The threat was clear, her eyes boring into mine, and for a moment I felt small like the outsider she'd always seen me as. But I held her gaze, my voice steady. "Protect him then. But you can't protect him from the truth." I turned to leave, my heart pounding, but her next words stopped me cold. "You were never right for him, Emily. You know that." I froze, my hand on the doorknob, her words slicing through me. Not because they were new, but because they echoed the doubt I'd buried, the fear that I'd failed him somehow. I didn't turn back, didn't give her the satisfaction. I walked out the door, closing softly behind me, and got into my car. The drive home was quiet, the radio off, the world outside muted. Diane's voice looped in my head, mingling with James's voicemail, Clara's tears. They were all fighting to keep their version of the story, but I'd changed it, and now they were scrambling. I pulled into my driveway, the house dark. Sarah gone to pick up her son. I sat in the car, my hands limp on the wheel, the locket in my pocket, pressing against my thigh. The triumph I'd felt was fading, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. I'd shaken James, cracked his world, but at what cost? Diane's words clung to me heavy and cruel, and I wondered just for a moment if she was right. The silence settled thick and final, and I closed my eyes, letting it swallow me whole. I woke to the sound of birds outside my window, their chirps soft against the early morning gray. The house was still, no buzzing phone, no urgent knocks. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the weight of James' betrayal pressing down. I pulled on a sweater and stepped onto the porch, the air cool, smelling of dew and cut grass. My coffee steamed in its mug, and I sat on the steps watching the neighborhood wake up, a quiet peace settling in my bones. Yesterday's confrontation with Diane lingered, her words a faint bruise, but they didn't cut like they would have before. I'd faced her, walked away, and the sky hadn't fallen. Amanda had called late last night, her voice steady with good news. James's lawyer was pushing for a settlement, rattled by the evidence. The house, our savings, a fair split, it was within reach. I'd nodded into the phone, relief washing over me, but it was this morning's stillness that made it real. I sipped my coffee, the warmth spreading, and thought of my Aunt Helen. She'd been a rock when my dad died, her small house a haven through my teenage years. I hadn't seen her in months, too caught up in my own storm. I grabbed my keys, leaving a note for Sarah, who was still asleep on the couch. The drive to Helen's was short through back roads lined with wildflowers, the kind of beauty I'd stopped noticing. Helen's house was a faded blue cottage, its porch sagging but welcoming. She opened the door, her gray hair pulled back, her smile instant. "Emily," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of cinnamon and soap. We sat in her kitchen, sunlight slanting through lace curtains, and I told her everything, not just James, but the envelope, Clara's guilt, Diane's venom. She listened, her hands wrapped around a chipped teacup, her eyes never leaving mine. "You're stronger than you know," she said when I finished, her voice soft but sure. I shook my head, a reflex, but she leaned forward. "Your dad used to say you had his fire. He'd be proud of you now." Her words landed gently, stirring memories of my father's laugh, his calloused hands teaching me to ride a bike. I'd lost him too young, but Helen's words brought him back, a quiet anchor in the chaos. She stood motioning me to follow and led me to her garden, a patchwork of herbs and roses. We knelt in the dirt, her hands deft as she pruned a bush, and I mimicked her, the earth cool under my fingers. "There's healing in small things," she said, handing me a sprig of mint. I pressed it to my nose, its sharp sweetness grounding me. For a moment, I wasn't the woman James had broken. I was just Emily planting roots in a new kind of soil. Back inside, Helen pulled a small box from a shelf, her fingers tracing its worn edges. "This was your dad's," she said, opening it to reveal a pocket watch, its face frozen at 3:17, the time he'd passed. She placed it in my hand, its weight heavy with meaning. "Keep it close," she said. "It's a reminder you can start again." I closed my fingers around it, my throat tight, and nodded. The watch felt like a promise, not just from her, but from me to myself. I left her house, the watch in my pocket, the mint sprig tucked in my bag. The drive home was slow, the radio off, my thoughts quiet. Helen's garden, her words, the watch, they were pieces of a life I could rebuild, not from James' ashes, but from my own strength. I pulled into my driveway, the morning sun higher now, and sat for a moment, my breath slow, steady. The world felt softer, like it was waiting for me to step into it whole. I stepped into the house, the quiet wrapping around me like a soft blanket. Sarah was up, brewing coffee, her smile gentle as she handed me a mug. "You look different," she said, tilting her head. I nodded, unable to explain the shift Helen's words had sparked. The watch in my pocket pressed against my hip, a steady reminder of time I could reclaim. I sat at the table, the morning light spilling across the wood, and felt a stillness I hadn't known in months. Sarah joined me. Her usual energy softened, and we talked about small things, her son's soccer game, a new book at the store. It was ordinary, but that was its power. I wasn't running from James's shadow anymore. I was here in this moment, whole. My phone buzzed, Amanda's name flashing, and I answered, ready for the next step. She was quick, her voice bright. "James signed the settlement, Emily. The house is yours, plus half the savings." I exhaled the news, settling like a stone dropped in calm water. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. I hung up, sharing the update with Sarah, who whooped, her laughter filling the room. "We're celebrating," she said, pulling out her phone to plan a weekend trip somewhere with mountains and no cell service. I smiled, the idea of open sky and quiet trails tugging at me. For the first time, I could imagine a future that wasn't tethered to James, one I'd build on my own terms. Later, alone in my bedroom, I opened a notebook, its pages blank, waiting. I'd never been much for journaling, but Helen's garden, the mint sprig still tucked in my bag, made me want to try. I wrote, my pen slow at first, then faster, spilling thoughts I hadn't voiced. I wrote about my dad, how his laugh used to fill a room, and about the woman I wanted to be, not the one James left, but the one who chose herself. The words flowed raw and honest, each one a step towards something new. The doorbell chimed, soft but unexpected. It was a delivery, a small package with no return address. Inside was a note from Clara, her handwriting shaky. "I'm sorry, Emily. I hope you find peace." Tucked beneath it was a photo of us from years ago at a family picnic, both smiling, unaware of what was coming. I traced the edges, my heart steady, not with anger, but with a quiet release. I set the photo aside, not ready to forgive, but not needing to carry the hurt anymore. I walked to the backyard, the grass damp under my bare feet. The roses I'd planted were blooming, their petals vivid against the green. I knelt, brushing my fingers over them, their softness a contrast to the hardness I'd carried. The watch ticked faintly in my pocket, a rhythm I could follow. I didn't need to fight anymore, not James, not Diane, not even myself. I stood, the air warm, the world wide open, and let the moment hold me light as a breath, steady as stone. My new apartment smelled of fresh paint and possibility, the kind of quiet that felt like a beginning. Boxes lined the walls, half unpacked their contents, a map of the life I was building. It was months later, the divorce papers signed, the house sold, the settlement wired to my account. I stood by the window, sunlight warming my face, and watched kids play in the courtyard below, their laughter a soft hum. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I'd found this place on a whim, a small loft with creaky floors and a view of the city skyline. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I'd spent the morning arranging books on a shelf, their spines a mix of old favorites and new ones I'd bought to mark this chapter. A ceramic mug sat on the counter, a gift from Sarah, its glaze catching the light. Small things, but they anchored me, reminders that I could choose what filled my space. The move had been chaos, Sarah directing movers with her usual fire, her son trailing behind, asking if he could have my old couch. We'd laughed the kind of laughter that heals, and I'd realized how much I'd leaned on her. She was coming over tonight, bringing wine and a plan for a hiking trip, something to chase the horizon. I smiled at the thought, my fingers brushing the locket I now wore daily, its weight a steady pulse against my skin. I sat at a folding table, my laptop open, and scrolled through emails. One caught my eye, from a local writing group I'd joined on a dare from Sarah. They'd liked my submission, a short piece about starting over, and wanted me to read it at their next meeting. I'd written it late one night, words spilling out about loss and resilience, not just James, but the me I'd found after. The invitation felt like a door cracking open, a chance to share my voice in a way I never had. I walked to the kitchen, brewing tea, the kettle's hum, a quiet comfort. The steam curled upward, and I let my mind wander, not to James, but to the woman I was becoming. I'd started running in the mornings, slow at first, my breath ragged, but each step felt like claiming ground. The park near my building was my route, its paths winding past dog walkers and old men playing chess. I didn't run to escape anymore. I ran to feel my own strength, to know my body could carry me forward. A knock at the door pulled me back. It was a neighbor, Lily, a quiet woman with kind eyes who'd welcomed me with cookies last week. She held a potted plant now, a tiny fern, its leaves delicate but stubborn. "Thought your place could use this," she said, smiling. I took it, my throat tight with gratitude, and set it by the window, its green, a promise of growth. Lily stayed for a moment, chatting about the building's quirks, and I felt a spark of connection, a thread to this new world. I closed the door, the fern's leaves swaying faintly, and returned to my table. The writing group's email was still open, and I typed a reply accepting the invitation, my hands steady. I wasn't the woman James had left, nor the one who'd cried outside that hotel. I was Emily, still learning, still stitching herself back together, but whole in ways I hadn't expected. I leaned back, the tea warm in my hands, and let the moment settle soft and sure, like a breath held long enough to feel alive. The afternoon light softened, casting long shadows across my apartment floor. I stood by the window, the fern's leaves brushing my fingers, and thought about the past months. Not James, not the hotel, not even the envelope I'd sent, but the quiet moments that had stitched me back together. I'd started baking again, a habit from my college days, filling the kitchen with the scent of bread and cinnamon. Each loaf was a small victory, proof I could create something whole from scattered pieces. I met Clara last week at a small cafe near her office. She'd reached out hesitant, and I'd agreed not out of obligation, but because I needed to close that door. She sat across from me, her hands nervous around her coffee cup, and apologized again, her voice steady but raw. I listened, not interrupting, and when she finished, I nodded. "I forgive you," I said, and meant it not for her, but for the weight I no longer wanted to carry. We parted without promises, but her small smile stayed with me, a reminder that healing wasn't just for me. Sarah threw a housewarming party a few nights ago, the apartment crowded with old friends and new faces from the writing group. Laughter bounced off the walls, glasses clinked, and I caught myself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in a long while. Lily brought her homemade salsa spicy and bright, and we danced to music from my college playlist, the kind that made my heart feel young. I stepped outside at one point, the night cool, and looked up at the stars, their light steady despite the dark. I felt my dad there in the quiet, his pride a warmth I carried inside. I started a blog, something I never thought I'd do. It began as a place to share my writing group pieces, but it grew strangers, leaving comments about their own betrayals, their own recoveries. One woman wrote about losing her marriage but finding her voice, and I read it twice, tears in my eyes, feeling less alone. The blog wasn't about fame. It was about connection, about saying, "I've been there, and you'll make it through." Each post was a step away to hold space for others while reclaiming my own. Amanda sent a package yesterday, a photo of us outside her office, both smiling after the settlement was signed. Tucked inside was a note. "You're unstoppable, Emily. Keep shining." I framed the photo, hanging it beside a painting I'd bought at a local market, its colors bold and unapologetic. It wasn't about erasing the past, but building around it, making room for joy alongside the scars. The lesson came slowly, not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of days. Betrayal doesn't define you. It reveals you. It strips away the noise, leaving only what's true: your strength, your capacity to love, your right to choose yourself. I learned to hold my pain gently, not as a wound, but as a teacher. It taught me to trust my own heart, to walk away from what diminishes me, and to find peace in the life I build, one small, deliberate step at a time. What's a moment that taught you who you really are? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story. If this journey resonated with you, please give it a like, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for carrying your own light. Here's to healing, to new beginnings, and to the quiet strength we all find within.